gosh.
We ready to go? Good morning. We will call the Bricktown Urban Design Committee meeting for May 9th, 2018 to order at 9:01 a.m. Would you mind calling the roll, please?
Brett Wall.
Here.
Jonathan Dotson.
Present.
Kasha Egan.
Here.
Omar Curry.
Present.
Richard McCown. Avis Scaramucci.
Here.
Sandino Thompson. You have a quorum.
Thank you. All right. We need to approve the minutes. Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
And a second? All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Nay. The motion passes. All right. Item 3, we have no cases withdrawn this month. Item 4, no continuance requests. Item 5, no items on the consent docket. Item 6, items for individual consideration. We're going to skip down to item B and hear item BCA-180014 first. This is the signage at 429 East California Avenue. Michael, would you get us up to date, please?
Sure. This is a proposal to change out some existing signage at the location 429 East California. This is the Bricktown Event Center. Presently, there is a Chevy, the word Chevy and the Chevy logo bow tie on the sign. And that was in conjunction with a sponsorship arrangement that Chevy had with the facility at some point, but that agreement has expired, and the Chevy has requested that their signage be removed from the facility. So they are in the process of removing that signage and replacing it with new signage that would basically take the same place that the existing signage shows right here, the Chevy and the bow tie logo, and that would be replaced with the new signage here, which says Bricktown Event Center. As we described in the report, the need for the size of the sign is to orient it and be readable, legible from Reno Avenue, which is probably 400 to 500 feet away across the vacant parking lot that sits in front of the project. Did want to point out that this sign, as proposed, is smaller than the signage that is coming off the building. And I also wanted to point out the report goes into a lot of detail about a variance being required. We've consulted with the municipal counselor's office, and they have informed us that the existing sign is considered a legal non-conforming sign, and therefore it can be modified and changed without going to the variance process, as long as it's not larger than it was before. And in fact, this signage is somewhat smaller than the signage that's coming down. So that relieves you from the responsibility of conditioning the project to get a variance, and also relieves you the responsibility to make a recommendation to the Board of Adjustment on the variance. And so this becomes a straight forward approval or denial prospect for the committee. We have recommended approval of the project, and we're supportive of the new signage, and we're prepared to respond to any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, Michael. Mr. Johnson, did you want to give us a quick update?
Good morning. Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates here on behalf of the applicant. I don't have anything to add to Michael's report. Just answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee?
The other two signs are just repeating over their doorways, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
And Michael, as you said, because the staff recommendations, it says there is no need for a variance now from the Board of Adjustment.
That's correct.
Okay.
So your motion would be to either just approve or deny the project as proposed.
I move to approve.
I would second it. Okay.
I'll second. Okay, we have a motion to approve in a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Okay, the item is passed. We're going to go back to our original item on the agenda, item A, BCA-180009. We had stalled just a little bit, hoping that maybe the property owner or artist would be with us. They are not, but Michael can at least give us his report on it.
Okay, this proposal is to install a set of projectors on the roof of the building at 12 East California. Well, first of all, they're removing, coincidentally, the Chevy logo signage from the water tower that exists on the building already. In fact, that signage has already been removed, so we're including that removal as part of this certificate of approval. Secondarily, after the removal, they are proposing to install a set of projectors on the roof of the building to project onto the water tower a piece of artwork that is actual in motion. It's basically like a video. And we were hoping the artist would be here to provide you with perhaps some motion images of what it will look like in operation. However, that's not apparently going to be possible. So what you see, the colored images with the pink and purple theme is basically what they're proposing to project onto the water tower. Through our review of the code, we've determined that this artwork must be reviewed as a sign, and as a sign, it has to comply with sign regulations, and projected image signs are limited to a 1-week period of time. The applicant is proposing to install this and have it operational for a period of 1 month, and therefore he needs a variance from the 1-week duration limitation that appears actually in 2 separate sections of the code. So we are supportive of the proposed request, and we are recommending approval of the project and also recommending that the committee provide a recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustment on the variance request. Prepared to respond to any questions the committee may have.
Michael, I have a quick question. What constitutes the definition of a sign versus this type of artwork?
That's a pretty convoluted wormhole to go down, but
Yeah, we wrote a synopsis of that. It took me about a week and 3 pages of writing to figure it out. Because projection image signs are defined as a type of sign in the sign code. And in that, it says they are to be reviewed as EMDs unless your specific design review district has other criteria. And Bricktown does have other criteria for projection image signs. So we didn't review it against the EMD, but against that. And we also say in the staff report on page 2, that would mean that projection images of any sort, including artistic graphics with or without text, would be considered a projection image sign. Does that answer the question? So it would be different from any design, for any other design districts potentially.
So from that standpoint, any artwork now is considered a sign. Because basically you can take that same analogy and use it on any artwork that we have.
No, just for projection image sign. Like murals are also specifically defined, and criteria for their review are specifically defined. There's also a use unit category called artistic graphics.
So there's a cloudiness in the definitions in the Bricktown definitions of what artwork is versus electronic images or murals. There's a
Correct. A mural is a separate thing from a projection image, from an artistic graphic, from a sign, from an accessory sign, from a non-accessory sign.
So at some point, do we need to go back and update our current codes? Well, not necessarily codes, but
Sure,
regulations.
yeah. No, we are, Robbie Kenzel, many of you guys know Robbie. She's the arts liaison. She is working on a study of how the mural code could be improved, and that is bleeding off into touching these other categories. For the last Bricktown ordinance update, we did tidy up some of the definitions, and we shrunk a lot of the size allowances.
Is the projector that is actually shooting this called a sign projector, or is it, because to me this would be a art projection, not a sign projection?
Yeah, this specific project is conceived as an art installation.
Right.
We thought the artist would be here to.
Right.
That it has a artist statement. It went to the Arts Commission to be evaluated. So
has it,
to Omar's point, sometimes the only tool we have to evaluate art is it a physical structure? Is it a sign? And that's why we have to look at the definitions. But for this project, it's presented as art.
Right.
has this gone before Arts Council already?
Yeah, Arts Commission reviewed
so.
it,
Okay.
and they had a couple of minor conditions. They wanted to see, like, art marker, and
Right, and-
they wanted some more information on the projector. I can't remember exactly.
Right, and they wanted the Vera waiver from the
Oh, right.
artist.
Okay.
So-
I have a couple of things. I think this is a nice addition to an entertainment district to have something like this. But first of all, so if this is approved as for an extension of a month, if they want to come back with another piece of artwork and change it, then they have to go through this whole process again, or how does that work? Because I can't imagine that they would just go to this trouble for a month and not move forward. So,
I think it's at the direction of the committee. If you want to approve this and provide a recommendation to the Board of Adjustment in support of the request, that you could also
And maybe extend it?
include in your motion that
okay,
any future extensions could be granted administratively by staff, or
okay.
if you feel comfortable with that, yeah.
Yeah, in our staff recommendation, we didn't condition the length of time. I personally am happy for it to be there.
Well, yeah.
How long it wants to be there. Often the committees want to set some threshold just in case other material starts popping up on the signs, that there would be another chance to check in. But once the variance can be granted.
Would it be out of our jurisdiction to just consider this artwork rather than sign and just say we approve it as artwork?
No, it's defined. I know what you're
already
saying. It's defined. I mean, somebody could, I guess, appeal the administrative determination of what it is.
Yeah, so, yeah, if someone wanted to contest whether or not it's a sign or a piece of art or how that's being decided, that could be appealed to the Board of Adjustment itself. But the Board of Adjustment, when they consider the variance application, whatever they may or may not grant is going to be determined by how the applicant actually puts the wording in their application to the Board of Adjustment. So if it's for an indefinite period of time, then that would be how the variance was granted. But if they put in a specific time period, it'll be limited to that. If that answers your other question.
Is there a way to just approve indefinitely, even with staff administration, contingent upon, if they change the art, are they going to have to go back to the art council? So can we, since this is really an artist issue, I know where we're being forced, but is there a way that we can kind of not necessarily shirk responsibility, but push responsibility on the art council to make a determination if they start putting something up there that we wouldn't typically approve? That would be the art council to deal with.
Well, one of my other comments, and this goes back probably 100 years ago, but at one time there was a business in Bricktown to the east of my location that wanted to put a moving sign on their building. And at the time, there was a lot of, and it wasn't called advertising, but it was just a woman walking across the window. I've seen that in hotels before. The concern at the time was that once something was approved, that if that actual business decided to change it, that they could change it without having to do anything. And at the time, because of the location of the business, there was concern that it might be changed and become inappropriate. So, and I don't think that's what this would be at all. I do think we need to put in some mechanism so that they don't have to go through the whole process again. My other thought is, are they changing from advertising, because I believe that they made money on the sponsorship of the Chevy sign on their water tower? Are they changing over to not doing any more for hire advertising on that water tower? Or is this just an interim thing? Because they were part of the Chevy sponsorship, and it was an expensive sponsorship too. Not for them, they received monies for it.
Right. Now, we have not been told what the conditions of all that were, just that they wanted to take off Chevy. And they haven't said they want to put anything else up anyway. Because
that was quite if Nathaniel was here, he would tell you that was quite a difficult thing to come by to begin with. So I didn't know if that would negate any further opportunities for them on that, or if it matters. But anyway, I think it's a great piece. I wish we could figure out a way to make it reasonable for the artist to renew that effort or change it a little bit with somebody's purview, but they shouldn't maybe have to go through the whole process. Boy, that was long.
I definitely have got to make some comments about this as well. We have got to do something to make it easier for art to happen. One of the most popular spots that teenagers I know come, it just is a whole evening of entertainment. They leave Norman, Oklahoma, and come to 9th Street and spend an hour taking pictures all around the unpermitted, never reviewed, illegal womb painting. That's artistic freedom. All my education's in painting and sculpture, and I'm absolutely always in favor of artistic freedom. We need to be a city that makes it easier for artistic freedom to happen. We also don't need things to happen that are inappropriate for, little kids to see. We got to figure that out. We absolutely have to figure that out. so that things happen organically for the lowest possible price and get the most amount of money into the artist's pocket so that things can happen again and again without burning up time and energy and effort and application fees, et cetera. It incenses me that this has to go before the Board of Adjustments. It is not a sign, it's a piece of art. I know Chad Mount. I've seen the project. This is an amazingly cool project. And this is just devastating to our hopes as a city. If we want to become a world-class, creative class, attracting city like Austin, Texas, or Portland or Seattle or any of those cities that we know about from the literature that says, this is how you attract creative class individuals to come, and we send signals to them. They're like, come to Oklahoma City. You will find other creative people that can staff your startup and can help you grow and exchange ideas. This is how we do it. It's absolutely how we do it. We make it easy for food trucks to happen. We make it easy for artwork to take place. We send signals that we're open and tolerant, and we want to see new ideas, even if they challenge our yeehaw aesthetics that we've inherited from a previous generation. And we've got to make this easier. And whatever we can do, we need to know what it is we can do to make Bricktown more delightful, entertaining, surprising, and more available for public art. That it burned up that much of your time having to figure this out, that's insane. And we need to take our collective effort and find a way to make this easy and find a way to be in total support of the artists. I'm in favor of approving this and extending the length to whatever they need it to be. Certainly if another sponsorship opportunity comes along, I get that, because those things are important. But we should not require them to come back down here again. I'm sure Chad's not here because he's like most of us artists. He probably has another day job. This is my day job, being a real estate developer.
So are you putting any limitations on that, as long as it's this art, or can they change it? May they change it?
I'm in favor of them changing it. I suppose, as we work through this, we probably need something along the lines of, as long as it doesn't turn into an advertisement for a product, meaning it actually becomes a sign, because that's easy enough to do. You just send a new code and say, now, come watch the whatever, or come buy, jelly beans. It could easily become a sign, and I understand the need for that. So as long as it is artwork, and as long as it is appropriate for an 8-year-old to see, that it had like the most modest amount of censorship, then I'm in favor of it being able to stay up.
Can we just,
Are you
comfortable doing something like indefinite approval pending administrative approval if the sign changes? So if they see something that seems off, they could at least bring it back up. Is there a way to do that or not?
I would also, if we can make it kind of open-ended, but with a catch-all if something should happen. I can't imagine that it would, but, we should never assume that forever things will be the same.
Right.
I don't know that currently the way the code's written that there's any kind of trigger for administrative review if there were to be an indefinite variance for a projection image sign on this water tower. I don't know that it would necessarily come back.
Right, a little bit ago I asked Laura if, I was like, well, what if they condition it to where if the art changes, it goes back to Arts Commission? But she and I weren't sure that we would know at what threshold
Changing,
that happened.
yeah.
So that's a good point. Obviously, if this is approved as art and 2 months from now you're driving by and it's Chevy, 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 obviously at that point it's crossed the code definition to a non-accessory sign, and there would be code enforcement action
Okay.
from that point. So once it ceases to be what it is.
Is there any, so we know that we've got that covered. The other side is, because that deals with they turn it into basically an advertising component for them to market some brand. That we now know we have a solution to. The second piece is, if there is something that is profane, is there any act that any group can do to say, hey, we should probably shut this down or revisit the site? Can the Art Council bring that up? Can Bricktown Urban Design bring it up?
Michael, is the artist statement in the file folder, or did they provide one? Is it in the case file?
The what now?
The artist statement. And the Arts Commission approved this on the basis of this piece, which has an accompanying statement of what it's trying to do. And that's part of, because we're not regulating content per se, but that's part of the premise of making it all ages.
Right.
Well, and the question too, would this only be approved for this artist? Would it have to go through approval process if they change the art?
To another artist?
Yeah. Because, I mean, we would say he probably has a portfolio.
Sure, they technically would
base it
need
on.
to go back through Arts Commission, but if the variance is already granted, I'm not sure they need to go back through us. But I'm also not sure we would know.
Right.
I would know some people from other people.
Well,
I think it's going to depend at least somewhat on how the applicant actually submits their application to the Board of Adjustment, because it's usually limited to whatever facts the applicant is putting forth. So if they're saying, this is the particular image that I'm going to be projecting onto this water tower, then the variance could be limited to just that, and for whatever duration the artist makes the application for.
I would say, considering, I don't know the artist, but I know that he's well spoken of here today, and I would trust that. And I do happen to know the owner of that tower. If we were ever going to take a chance to move forward and do something kind of important in this regard, I think this would be a good opportunity to do it. We may have a problem later on down the line, but as an older view of my community, I also see such importance with making sure that community stays vibrant and that it draws all ages. So I think this would be a good chance to take on something like this if that doesn't just make everybody else so nervous. I would certainly be willing to do that.
Is there a way that if Chad gets run over in a car wreck and another artist steps in and says, oh, I've got an idea, and then they turn it into basically an advertisement for, some strip club down in that other town where all the strip clubs are, then you say, oh, okay, now it's complaint, like you said, and code enforcement, or it's a shift, to some other thing that was just like, whoa, that's inappropriate, and therefore also is a complaint. And you could say that about the womb, so I'm walking a line that really makes me nervous here, because, again, I'm not ever in favor of censorship. But we do need a little sense, like good judgment.
The Womb did get a mural permit and a sign permit, and then they painted something really profane on it about 3 years ago.
Okay.
And so they got cited. They came in with a revised application to Arts Commission, and that got ironed out. But, yeah, I mean, people want artistic freedom, but I think everyone agrees that went too far. But
Not everyone.
No, not everyone.
Apparently not everyone.
Almost everyone but me. I think it's really great the way it is. I didn't know. I'm glad. Thanks for the clarification. I'd always heard it was just a rogue project. I'm like, yes, go rogue. Okay. So anyway, the last thing I want to say is, if you haven't been across the street To the north, I cannot pronounce this, it's Apachipang. Anyway, the Serenity of Madness show has to do with video projection and like where art is right now. Carve out an hour and a half, take your time, go see it. Amazing show, really, really great. I'll be happy to meet you over there. Anybody wants to take me up on it and see it again, fabulous, absolutely. And we need more things like that. It's very engaging. So it expands your idea of the definition of art and what it can be and engagement. So how do we move forward? Do we need a motion?
I want to say one other thing too before.
I want to say, was there an artist statement?
There's an artist statement and there's a description of the work. The artist statement is incomplete and incoherent. The description of the work, and I think that might have been one of the things the Arts Commission made a condition.
Yeah, that they were supposed to
going to get a full and
with
complete artist statement. I don't know that we've seen that yet. The description of the work is projected light displaying dynamic artwork onto the water tower. And it does say projecting dynamic artwork. So those are three pretty definitive words when you link them up together. To me, it doesn't read as, they can change it to a sign at any time. You do need to be aware, though, the committee does need to be aware that the code enforcement process can take a long time to get resolved. And we've seen examples that have taken over 2 years.
Michael, does the statement at all addresses the ownership of the projectors? Is it part of the artwork? Does the artist own the projectors as well?
No, it's my understanding the building owner bought the projectors and the system that runs it.
I would own, I would propose, in an effort to push it forward, that we approve it contingent upon administrative approvals if the artwork were to change, if that's the route we have to take. I would also like to recommend that we actually change the definition of what this is, because this is not a sign, this is art. From just a stepping back and looking at it, we know we're forced into this decision because of the way that code is written, but we all know this is art. We want to make it easier on the artist. We need to fix that, and so whatever needs to happen there, I think the whole committee leans into saying we want this to get figured out so that this doesn't come to us, because we shouldn't be looking at this.
Is that a motion, Jonathan?
Yes, that's a really long motion.
Second.
Could you restate a boiled down version?
I had a quick question on that. So, Jonathan, what you're saying is that we want to bake in administrative approval pending Arts Commission approval.
I don't know if we can force that. What I would say would...
Yeah, and I don't think we need a motion. Like if you're telling me that you don't need changes to come back here, I think they can just, or do.
Could be administrative approval. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I was just saying that then if it's like something super crazy they're trying to put up, Michael can be like, whoa.
Well, that's part of what we already do.
Right.
There's pretty big administrative thresholds in most of the design districts. We choose to take most art because it's usually so high profile
Right.
and so subjective, even though it is within the threshold of what we would normally approve. We also choose to take it a lot because we think it's great exposure for the artist.
I agree.
Right.
So what is the motion?
Well, my original motion was to approve it, and if there was a change to the art that they felt like the way our current code reads, there has to be some approval from this board, and that's what I'm confused about. Is there a change that would require us to reapprove it? If so, I don't want us to have to reapprove it. I want the administrative approval.
I agree with that.
Yeah, and I'll have to take a closer look at the way the code is written to see if that's something that can be delegated, even by making a motion, or if it's something that would require an ordinance change.
Okay. And then I would like for us to change our ordinance so that we don't approve art when we all know it's art and it's not a sign.
Yeah,
That could be
second.
a second, yeah, that's a different motion, right?
Is it really two motions? A second
Two
motion.
motions.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the project as is.
I didn't.
With the, one of your conditions is also that they get the variance.
Yes, yes, sorry. Yes, and they get a variance for this piece of art.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve the project conditional upon a variance through the Board of Adjustment, and that's the motion.
Second.
Okay. All right, all in approval, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed,
Aye.
nay? Okay,
And then we need a recommendation on the variance.
right. So item 1 is passed. Item 2, we need a motion to recommend approval to the Board of Adjustment.
I second that. Are you recommending that, or are you just?
I'm putting.
I would recommend that.
Asking for.
I move that we, yeah.
Okay, then I second that.
You said, you did you
Yeah, I
get it
second
out?
the move.
You second, okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right, so we have a motion on my motion, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed, nay. Item number 2 is recommended. All right, moving on to item 7, other business, which we do not have any. Item 8, we had quite a few administrative approval reports this month, which is good. These things are happening in Bricktown. Do we have any comments from the planning department staff? Do not. Any comments from the committee members?
Relative to the administrative approval stuff, or just in general?
In general.
Yeah, I have some comments.
Okay.
Okay, last month, the month before, we looked at the ramp, and I had an unofficial conversation about larger ideas of...
Richard, hold on one second.
Not really. I had an unofficial conversation with a designer with an idea of having, like, where are we going, right? It was a conversation about the bigger picture of Bricktown. And one of the ideas had to do with, I was pushing this notion of moving the ramp out into space, adding a couple of columns. And the designer I was talking to about this was saying, that could begin to foreclose the potential of even a more elaborate thing that is an overlook, that's wider, more, this ramp we're looking at, or have been looking at, is wide enough, but it's certainly not wide enough to become like, a photo opportunity spot, et cetera. There's another idea floating around that I got a hold of having to do with like in getting Rick Sennett engaged to do this incredible butterfly thing, and then that becomes like a ramp that goes down to the even more extreme, goes down. And that all becomes like a big picture idea of going somewhere for maybe a MAPS 4 collection of projects, maybe several different canal extensions in different directions. And if we were to really get our act in gear and make that list and make some sketches of what we think major improvements for ADA accessibility, walkability, visual exposure to the canal, et cetera, we could put a bigger basket together that said, here we go, here's some modest improvements we'd like to see made to an original MAPS 1 project, being the canal. So I think those are really good points, and if we're at this moment that if we could sort of jump past where we are with these ADA ramps when they do come back, and look at where we really want to go, the big picture, and not just wait on one or two odd buildings to come along, but really getting geared toward a master plan I am happy to, take offline, however we could do this, a subcommittee that could work on it and just hammer down through what are the ideas and take it back to the downtown OKC as well as the Bricktown board and gather ideas and move this through on a very quick timeline to try and have something, gathered up and agreed upon as a proposal, maybe by September, October, but it's going to take some effort, and certainly I could use some supervision to make sure I don't go off the rails. But anyway, I think just getting another perspective on the bigger picture has been helpful. The other conversation I've had, and this has to do with my work in another municipality not too far away, this inability to have a dialogue with the applicants is not the only way to do things. And we're a deciding body, a quasi-judicial body. And so you put the applicants in this really bizarre situation where they have done all this design work, and then they show up here and they're hearing design input at the very end of a process. Design input always should go in at the beginning of the process. And I don't know if we could re-examine how we do things and say, we'd like to see things at a conceptual stage, and then we can have a conversation about it before they go into the dimensioned construction drawings and or engineered drawings. But we've had several things come in just since I've been a commissioner, and it hadn't been that long. And I think we've got a system here that's not functioning the way it's intended. The applicants are frustrated, we're frustrated, and we're not getting what we want. And the last thing we want to do is make it difficult to develop in Oklahoma City, and really the last thing we want to do is make it difficult to develop in Bricktown. We're already seeing very, very few applications. And, I make my living standing on the other side of this thing, getting things approved. And this is a nightmarish process when you're on the other side. And so one way around it is to change our structure to where we're more recommending, or we take on a recommending role as opposed to a deciding role. And I don't know if that can be done, if we can split where when we're seeing things in a preliminary standpoint we can have a conversation, and then later, it's like, well, it's complex, but we could really use some work on this.
I believe I have seen people come before this group on several occasions in the very early stages to just have discussions. And I think that's what you're suggesting. I think that is already in place if people just knew about it. I think that's the message that somehow we need to start spreading, because he's on the consideration list this time. Nathaniel, I can't tell you how many times Nathaniel came before this group back when on a project he was working on, just to see, just to get our thoughts and ideas. So maybe, is that something that it's publicly known we're allowed to do?
Yes, we always encourage applicants, especially on larger projects, to come in for an informational presentation. We have talked, lots of people have suggested that we find a way to do more of a workshop type atmosphere where people are around the table. We can't do that. Well, we've talked about what could we do it, and I don't want to explain everything we've researched on this, but we could do it. We could do it non-quorum, but one concern is that the full body's not there, so the people who are there may be suggesting changes and an opinion that the other half don't agree with. And that would be a huge disservice to the applicant. Parts of this process are uncomfortable for both sides. I think overall the results speak for themselves. I think we have much higher quality of development than ever. What was your other point? Oh, about we staff, I'm thinking about your recent project in downtown, Richard. We met with Richard at it was the site and an idea. We went over what are the rules, what's the DDF say, we did that. We had several meetings. Then we had a meeting when the site plan was just blocks of program. Hey, how does this work? Yes, okay. Then we had a meeting where, okay, it's a three-dimensional thing. We have heights, we have materials. That is, we do that on most, the vast 90% of projects. Some don't realize that they need to talk to us sooner than later, and I think the streetscape falls in that, but
Yeah.
most projects we've had a long time active role.
I don't think you
that's-
can. I'm sorry, August, go ahead.
I think that should be our message, is that we encourage people to come on the front end, and maybe they come more than once. It's time well spent for us and for them, because they are more on the right road to start with. And again, for Nathaniel, he'll be here next time because we talk about him otherwise, but he probably came 3 or 4 times on the same project. So I agree with Richard. We need a way to encourage people to come and to share their ideas and find out what is workable in this city and what is not, and before they spend just a gazillion dollars on it. And it's, it takes more time on our part at the very end if we have to sort through the whole process, when we could have maybe been more familiar with it on the get-go and throughout the process. So is there a way to make that more well-known? Maybe that would be a great beginning anyway. When people start out on a project, is there a way to do that?
I'm not aware of it. I've been here for some time now, and I've seen both kinds of projects come in through here where it's just the beginning part, and some that maybe don't understand the process. They haven't done work in the Bricktown area or in any other design district. Some of my clients that come through, even though I may not be the design architect on their projects, I always tell them to go talk to staff first on any given project. But there are people out there that don't understand the process, and I don't know how to get that information out to them, outside of them doing some research,
I think the hardest part is I'm actually not concerned about Richard or Nathaniel in terms of making it easier on, they've navigated it, they've figured it out, our development team continues to try to figure it out. The issue is trying to create accessibility to the younger generation, for there to be new projects that are less constraining and a path forward. And I think that's the issue that we've found, that we're not sure where the answer lies. But it is really difficult if you're a young, developer trying to figure out how to do something, whether it's in Bricktown or Urban Design District or wherever, where to go, who to talk to, and that whole process. I see over and over again people go, yeah, I can't ever do that again. That was too hard. Like, it's not worth that pain to get it approved. And so I don't feel like this is a Bricktown urban design issue. This is a city. We got to figure out how to simplify that process and make it where you can project out, hey, these are the things you need to do. If you do these things, you're going to be okay. But I still have not seen a roadmap that anyone could use to figure that out. So,
Jonathan, a lot of times when this happens, the only time they catch it is when they file for permit.
Yeah.
And the staff down there tells them, hey, you need to go talk
Yeah.
so-and-so, and they don't understand it either.
Right.
one of the ways to modify it would be to basically change our charter and make us a recommending body. The problem is I don't know who we would be making recommendation to, because clearly we don't want to pile more things on to some other group, but it is worth diving deeper into.
Well,
There is no place. It is so much easier to build in the greenfield suburbs. That's why 95% of development happens out there. It costs so much less to build in the greenfield suburbs, and that's a fact all over the United States. And all of these processes gobble up time and resource, effort, energy, and they're discouraging. And yet everything we want more people developing, building, moving, businesses, residents, everything downtown, and yet we make it really difficult and expensive. And it is difficult and it is expensive. And this is not, I mean, it's a big deal. And anyway, I think the problem, I don't think it's working. I think we have a broken system, and if I'm going to hold that opinion until we do something different about it, because it's really, really hard to navigate this, especially if you're new at it. And most people who come to work downtown see downtown as an opportunity to get a foothold because so much infrastructure is already built. It's almost impossible to go jump into this business on the greenfield suburbs because it takes so much capital and major extension of infrastructure, et cetera. So this is our opportunity to figure out how to make it easier and make more sense. Anyway, I think we've got a long way to go.
Richard, I'm not understanding your point about it being more expensive to or harder to invest or do a project in Bricktown or downtown outside of the cost expense for the property versus greenfield. I'm not following the logic behind the hardest part. It's harder to.
It's way harder. I mean, there's so many different things that you're having to work through versus greenfield development.
I mean, but that's the point of the Bricktown Design Committee, is because you can't just go up there and put an EFS building or a metal building in the middle of Bricktown. I mean, there are certain design guidelines that you have to follow. And is that what you're saying is the hard part about it?
No.
Or
Yeah.
No, the hard part about it, when you look at the overall rules of building permitting, et cetera, everything downtown is inverted from the standard building practices, whether you're talking about required setbacks, landscaping requirements, et cetera. So you have this whole new basket of rules you've got to get familiar with. So you bring your consultants in, or if you're independent, just trying to do something small, like put a piece of artwork up. I mean, you're walking into this maze of complexity that is really, really hard to understand. And we don't have a simple way to just bring an idea and begin to engage and say, well, let's have a dialogue about that idea, and here's how you might want to change it to achieve the desired outcome of walkability. I mean, walkability is totally designed out of everything in suburban greenfield development, right? But that's what everyone has been working with for 50 years. I mean, the consultants that are there to, draw things up all understand one, inherited body of knowledge, and then they come here to downtown and they go, oh, wait, that's not how we do it downtown. Here's what we want downtown. And the vast majority of things downtown are illegal. I mean, they're illegal in the standard subdivision code. That's what I mean by it being really hard.
And on top
so
of,
you keep bouncing against these walls that we put up, which are great. I mean, we want the desired outcome, But the thing is that the whole industry that's not designed to get that outcome, especially here in this part of the United States, because the inherited body of knowledge is the suburban subdivision and building code, and so when you get to downtown, you start discovering all of this nuance and complexity, whether it's from the fire marshal to the design review to, everything about it is inverted from the standard way of doing things. And there's so little of it that happens, you don't have a big body of consultants and or contractors, et cetera, that can help push this through because it's such a small piece of the overall development industry. That's what I'm talking about.
Do you agree that in certain districts, you have to do things differently? I'm sorry. I thought I did. No, do you agree that in certain districts, you have to do things differently than in a suburban area?
I think, if I could just interject, I think that we all know that every area requires a perhaps bit of a different set of eyes because we're all different. But overall, I think the difference is it's just a much more complex system in downtown and a much more expensive path to get to the end than it is outside. A lot of people think that all of the development is downtown, but really most of the development is outside of downtown. It's always easier and less expensive to deal with new property than it is older things that you either work with or go through a process of removing. But it is very different. If you've not experienced that, and it has nothing to do that we're a different district from Midtown or Film Row. We're all different. So suburban Oklahoma City, but it's a more complex process.
I think the biggest trouble I'm having is I keep hearing the word more expensive. And I don't see that in any of the projects that I've worked on, whether it was in the suburban area or Bricktown or in a different design district.
Well, I, as a property owner and developer in lots of areas, I would have to disagree with that.
When you say expensive, are you talking about the expense of going up in front of this body, or?
I think maybe where some of the disconnect is not only do you have consultants that are trained to think about suburban development because that's where 95% of the activity happens. The city staff in general is trained to think about suburban development and how that works out. And so what we found is what creates a lot of increased expenses is as you take a project through, there is multiple redesigns, whether it's sewer water, whether it's curb bump out, whether it's the redesign. And we're dealing with people who have done this, whether the engineers, civil engineer, architect that have done it 100 times in Oklahoma City downtown. But it's someone who decides to look at it a little differently, and that requires a whole overhaul of design. Whereas my friends who develop in the greenfields, they go out to the suburbs, it's pretty well laid out. There is no interpretation of what this means in regard to runoff and where it needs to go. It's been codified pretty well, and there's 45 other projects to do that. So we typically, when we go through a process where a lot of our expenses end up, it's not in making sure that we have the right exterior material, whether it's brick or, like we know because we're developing in a certain area, we're not wanting to put that up anyways. Where you hit the issue is when you're trying to get your project all the way through, and then the fire marshal changes his mind on something, and that just doesn't happen in the suburbs like it does in the urban core.
But I've had it happen in the suburbs as well.
It's not to say that it doesn't happen. It's not to say that it doesn't happen. But I will say every project we've had, of the 20 projects we've had major issues with some kind of redesign that was due to an interpretation that we all read it differently, but it doesn't matter. So I don't know if that's...
Really the only piece of this we can do something about here is we've got a collective amount of experience and knowledge about downtown. And if we had the ability to have more of a conversation with applicants, especially the ones that come in, the guy with the falls, that use that as an example. If we had had more of an ability to engage with him in a dialogue early on in the process, it would have just been easier. I served as a Greenbelt commissioner for 9 years in Norman. That's a recommending body that recommends to city council. It's just the way that that's structured. And so because of that, we constantly were meeting with applicants. We were constantly drawing on their plans, like, think about doing it this way. Because as a group, we had so much experience with seeing projects come in, interacting with the waterways, interacting with walking trails, green belts, et cetera, that we could share that knowledge and see possibilities that the applicant was just missing because they had no experience with it. They didn't know that that was something we were wanting to have as an outcome, and they were just like, well, my engineer drew it up this way, and they're the expert. Well, it's like, no, we have other expertise we're needing to share with you. And what I'm calling into question is this inability for us to share our expertise, get it to the applicant by any means necessary. And I'm clearly, I don't like having my hands tied, and I want to find a way to be able to engage before the applicant has drawn something up. Like we've had several examples where an engineer has been here with construction plans, and it's like, you missed something big. Like, that shouldn't be there. It should be over here on public space. And we should have had that conversation before all of that time, energy, and effort went into it. And I'm really insistent that we figure out a way to be able to engage, because we were asked to come serve on this committee because of our knowledge, because of our experience, and it's not universal. What we know isn't widely known by the industry. The books we read aren't widely held. Walkability is deeply misunderstood. Most people haven't a clue as to how it works. Most people who are professionals and work in the industry. That's all I'm really trying to get at.
All right.
I have one more thing to add. Richard brought up the ramp that will be brought back before you at the June 13th meeting. I did want to update the committee to indicate that we have had a meeting with the Public Works Department. We feel it was a very productive meeting. They have agreed to sketch out, I think, a minimum of 3 alternatives, possibly 4 alternatives. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because one of the things we talked about at that meeting was possibly having an on-site meeting with members of the committee at the site. And we were talking about possibly doing that the week prior to June 13th. So we may be contacting you individually to set up those on-site visits with staff, public works staff, and committee members.
I don't know how that came about specifically, because I was across the ocean playing with my grandson in London. But thank you. I think this is part of, Michael, of what we're talking about and working through things and working together. So thank you.
I'll ask a question to that. Has Public Works, have they stopped work on, it looks like they're not even continuing with the second ramp on the alternate corner, or is that one still being put in?
That one is approved, and they're
Okay.
at their
I just saw that
free will to install it.
Oh, okay.
As
The last time I was there, it looked like they stopped working on that area, but, okay.
Thank you, everybody, for your thoughts, thoughtful commentary. It's always nice to engage in any kind of dialogue that helps better our city, our processes, development. So don't want to lengthen this too much, but sort of as a practitioner, I run into those same things too. Unfortunately, it usually causes my client to have to pay me more to go back and do revisions and things like that, which may not be a bad thing, but but we do run into it. So I just wanted to kind of just pop that in there, that that is a real thing that from our side as well. So our next meeting will be June 13th, 2018. And we are adjourned for today at, what time is it? 10:05 a.m. Thank you, everybody.